Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Ralph, and I work in the Stress Neurobiology and Prevention Lab with Phil Fisher and graduate student Andrea Imhoff. My study will be on evaluating responsive caregiving behaviors within the fine intervention. As we all know and may have experienced, severe forms of stress can have a serious toll on our mental and physical well-being. And of course, the same is true for infants. Children that experience early life stress are at a higher risk for developmental difficulties and poor stress regulation. This may be due to different environmental factors such as neglect, abuse, domestic violence, and so on. But luckily, previous research has shown that a supportive relationship between an infant and its caregiver, also known as responsive caregiving, can potentially reverse the effects of early life stress. Because of this, there's been an increasing awareness for creating interventions that promote responsive caregiving. In the field, there's still a lack of consensus for what defines responsive caregiving, but there are two main theories that I want to highlight. One is contingent responsiveness. This is back and forth interactions between the caregiver and the child. An example of this is serve and return interactions, where the child will serve by playing with something or making a vocalization, and the caregiver returns that serve by responding in a way that is supportive to what the child is doing. Another theory of responsive caregiving is sensitive parenting. This focuses on the idea of improving secure attachments and following the child, meaning that caregivers are sensitive to child cues and respond supportingly. In my lab, we have the filming interactions to nurture development intervention, also known as FIND, and in this intervention, we combine both of these responsive caregiving techniques and focus particularly on serve and return interactions and following behaviors. In this case, we encourage parents to notice what their child is doing, and the child could be doing anything like playing with a toy or staring at the ceiling, but caregivers are encouraged to follow the child's focus and respond in a way that supports the child's interests. We have found preliminary evidence that the FIND intervention improves caregiver self-efficacy, parental executive function, and child outcomes, as shown in the bottom half of the screen. However, we have yet to determine if this is due to the FIND interventions potentially changing the way that parents and children interact with each other, indicated by the question mark on this triangle. The FIND theory of change predicts that the FIND intervention changes the way that parents and children interact with each other by increasing serve and return interactions and the amount of time that parents follow their child's lead. And by doing so, this will contribute to the positive downstream effects that we've seen in those other papers. Because of this, my thesis evaluates whether the FIND intervention increases the frequency of caregiver following behaviors across the intervention period. The FIND intervention consisted of participants from the early Head Start programs in the Denver, Colorado metropolitan area. In total, there were 138 parent-infant dyads able to participate. The intervention was only available in English and Spanish. And for my study, only English-speaking videos were used because at the time we did not have Spanish-speaking video coders, and because of this, my sample size is only 18 parent-infant dyads, 11 of which participated in the FIND intervention, and 7 participated as control families who just had early Head Start services. Because of my small sample size, my data will be used as a pilot trial to see if the FIND intervention does increase parental following behaviors. Each family will be recorded before and after the intervention period. Therefore, there will be 2 videos per family, one pre and one post, and then 36 videos in total. In order to see if the FIND intervention increases the amount of time caregivers follow their child's lead, my lab has worked together to develop this coding scheme called flow coding, and this stands for following, leading, and other. In our videos, a parent is coded as following when they're looking at the child, paying attention what the child is doing, and supporting the child's play. For example, as seen in the picture in the left, the parent is noticing what the child's doing and reacting. Maybe they're saying something like, "Wow, you did it," or "Great job." On the other hand, a parent is coded as leading when they're taking control of the play or adding something new to the play which changes the focus of the child's attention. For example, in the picture on the right, the parent is not looking at the child and it looks like they're doing this task themselves. Maybe they're initiating the play by saying, "Let's set up these blocks," when the child didn't necessarily show interest in this activity beforehand. We also coded a variable called other, and this occurred when the parent was not engaged with the child or distracted by other objects, or maybe talking to someone else. Lastly, we also had a no-code variable, which was when the parent and the child's face and hands were out of the frame or it was indistinguishable what they were doing. So we coded all these videos and compared each caregiver's percent following behavior in the pre-intervention videos to the post-intervention videos. And this is an example of what our code comparisons would look like. Basically, we added how much time the caregivers were following, which is shown here in the purple bars, and calculated what percentage of the time the caregivers were following in that particular video. This is an example of a huge change in following, but in this video, the caregiver was following the child 50% of the time before the intervention period, and then 94% of the time after the intervention period. And we predicted that for the participants in the fine intervention group, the average of all the post-intervention videos of following behaviors will be higher than the following behaviors averaged in the pre-intervention videos. For our results, we ran a two-way Anova, but first I want to highlight that here on the left side of the graph, it looks like there's a difference in pre-groups. A t-test showed that there was no significant difference, but because it looks like the groups don't start in the same place, we ran an Anova and found that the level of pre-scores did significantly predict the level of post-scores. As you can see, the fine group did have a lower percent following at pre than the control, and so that would predict that they would have a higher post-score than the control. For our Anova analysis, the results are non-significant, but I still want to acknowledge that we still see the trends that we predicted. On this slide, we see that the fine intervention group had an increase in following behaviors, which is about a 20% increase, while our control group had little to no change in following behaviors across the intervention period. These results suggest a couple of possibilities. With the Anova analysis that we found, one possibility is that families with lower percent following behaviors at pre are more likely to have higher percent following behaviors at post, regardless of the condition the families were placed in. In this case, this change may not be due to an intervention effect. But another possibility is that the fine intervention does have the potential to increase following behaviors in parents. Although our results were not significant, there was a change in the fine intervention group compared to our control group. Of course, neither of these claims can be deemed true without results from a larger sample size. And because of this, it's important to discuss some of the limitations of this study. First is our small sample size. We only coded about 1/7 of our available dataset because there were only 36 English videos. And like I said before, at the time of data collection, we did not have any Spanish-speaking video coders to tackle the Spanish-speaking videos, but that is in the works. Another thing is the flow coding scheme is still being developed. We've been working on this coding scheme for the past year, and it's close to being finished, but it's not completely ready yet. And because of this, reliability with new coders that have joined throughout the year have been pretty low. But for this study, we've had coders who've been working on this measure the longest code all the videos, and reliability was much higher. It was about 80%. But because of these limitations, future studies with this dataset should finalize the flow coding measure and make sure that new coders can easily learn it as well. And secondly, is to code the whole dataset. And once we have done this again with a much larger sample size, we can see more accurate trends of the data and the potential effect the fine intervention has on parents and infants. Thank you.